Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. We're about to get started with our webinar on the New York State Historic Homeownership Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. Looking forward to bringing this information to everyone. We've got a great turnout, so really looking forward to diving into this today. Just a couple of housekeeping rules to start off. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A provided. And what we'll do is at the very end of our program, we'll take a look and try to answer as many questions as we can. This is a very busy webinar today, so if we don't get to all of your questions, give me a day or so and I can hopefully follow up on those remaining questions. And then if you don't hear from me, go ahead and feel free to reach out by email. So my name is Christina Hingle. I'm the Preservation Policy Manager at the Preservation League of New York State. And we are the statewide nonprofit program. And we are very involved in New York State with the Historic Homeownership Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. And we feel it's a very strong program for encouraging historic preservation across New York State. One other thing I just wanted to mention is this program will be recorded. So if you know folks that are going to be interested in it, or you want to review some things that we've gone over today, you will be able to find this on YouTube shortly. So later today, I'm really excited. We're going to be joined by Nick Zumbulyadis. He has restored his home in the Maplewood Historic District up in Rochester. And so we're really looking forward to hearing this from a homeowner's perspective in terms of the projects that he's been able to do on his home and how this program has really helped him. So we'll jump right into it. So as I mentioned, we're the Preservation League of New York State. We're your statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization. And this is our headquarters in Albany, pictured. And while we're not working from there at the moment, we will be back hopefully soon. We're in a wait and see pattern as everyone else is. And we right now are all working from home, but still able to provide our statewide support for historic preservation programs. So we do cover all of New York State, which is quite a task. We are only a full-time staff of 7, so we do our best to really be involved all over New York State for our historic preservation initiatives. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what we do in our focus areas before we jump into historic tax credits. So as I mentioned, New York is a big state to cover. So one of the ways we do cover the entire state is through our Preservation Colleagues program. And this program is really helpful because this allows us to stay in touch with other organizations who have an interest in historic preservation across New York State. And it allows us to kind of have boots on the ground in all different regions of New York State in terms of what issues might be coming up in preservation or how we might be able to help as a preservation organization on the statewide level. We also have a robust technical services and outreach program, which we accept calls from the general public and from municipalities on issues of concern for preservation in New York State, and try to offer assistance best we can on a statewide level. We also have grant programs, including our Preserve New York and technical assistance grants, which we are able to team up with the New York State Council on the Arts for those wonderful programs to be offered to offer grants to nonprofits and municipalities. We also have an Endangered Programs Loan. Our EPIP loan program is able to grant loans to organizations and others who are trying to rehab a historic building but might have trouble getting traditional loans or might have high interest loans. So this is a way to give a low interest loan and try to put some of those historic properties back into service. Then our 7 to Save is another program where we highlight our threatened resources and we try to call attention to some of these wonderful historic and cultural resources in New York State and try to see what we can do to help advocate for them on a statewide level. And then last but not least, we have our public policy program, which we advocate on the federal, state, and local levels for historic preservation initiatives. This is mainly what I do, along with our Vice President of Policy and Preservation, Erin Tobin. And much of our policy work is on historic tax credits as the lead organization advocating for these historic tax programs in New York State. So that's just a little bit of background on what we do. And obviously, given our public policy involvement with historic tax credits, that's one of the reasons we really were delighted to bring this information to you on the homeowner historic tax credit program. Again, if there's any technical issues or anything, please try to put that in the chat. Hopefully everyone's hearing me okay. Great to see people are filling out the chat. It's so great to see where people are from, and hopefully we get a great showing from around the state today. So just a little bit about tax credits to get us started. What is a tax credit? A tax credit is an amount of money that can be offset against a tax liability. A lot of folks ask us if it's different from a deduction, which it is. Unlike a deduction, it reduces the taxable income. A credit is a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of taxes that you will owe to New York State. Three types of historic tax credits that you should be aware of. There's a federal commercial property tax credit for 20%, a state New York State commercial property tax credit at 20%, and then what we're talking about today is the homeowner New York State 20% historic tax credit. Now, since we're focusing on homeowner today, I just want to make you aware that on June 1st, we'll be specifically covering a combination of the homeowner and commercial property tax credit for mixed use buildings. So that might be something you might be interested in on June 1st. And then June 29th, we'll be doing a straight commercial property tax credit. So I encourage you to attend those if that's something you're also interested in. So why historic tax credits? Why are they important? Well, they're financial incentives for historic preservation. I think we all agree that it's great to be able to preserve architecture that's unique to a community and provide a sense of place and reuse building stock. Also great to keep things out of landfills and further our climate-based energy initiatives. But without that financial incentive, there are projects that simply wouldn't be able to get done without historic tax credits. So this is a great opportunity to be able to incentivize people protecting and preserving their historic buildings. Also, it's a big encourager of revitalization and economic development, and it really does create more jobs in terms of, obviously for the homeowner program, it's going to be more construction jobs, and then when we talk about commercial tax credits, you get more into long-term jobs and tourism and that type of thing. So a little bit about the program. It is for private and owner-occupied residences. It's a 20% credit, and you can get that up to a $50,000 credit. You have to spend $5,000 as a minimum for your project, and 5% of that must be on the exterior. As you see in the photo, they've clearly hit the exterior mark on the work that they've done on this building. And then you must meet a series of additional qualifications, which I'll go through on the next slide. So I just wanted to point out, while the League heavily advocates for historic tax credits and the programs offered by New York State, it's actually the State Historic Preservation Office here in New York, or the SHPO, and this is their program which they administer. And we certainly advocate and support this program, but we really would lead you to them once you're ready to start a project and if you have further questions on their application process. So qualifying for the historic tax credits. There are a number of qualifications. It must be listed either individually or as a contributing building to a historic district on the National Register of Historic Places, or it could be a certified building, which would be located in a certified local district. This is a little bit different of a process to qualify, but that's also something the SHPO would be able to help you in determining. And then lastly, this is the big one, it must be in an eligible census tract to qualify. The census tracts are median income based. So the census tracts have a median family income at or below the state median family income in New York State. So there's a pretty easy process to determine this on the SHPO website. It can be done yourself, or you can reach out to the League and we can help. And then obviously, of course, the SHPO would be able to help you with that as well to see if you are in a qualifying census tract. I think the important thing to remember about this is really is a revitalization economic driver. So you are going to find that the more the higher income communities may not qualify, as they may not be in a qualifying census tract. The other thing I wanted to point out is there's also a new qualification, which is you can also be in a city with a population under 1 million with above a 15% poverty threshold. And so this was a provision that the League advocated for in 2019. And what it served to do was to create more eligible properties and really bring historic tax credits to the places that need it most. So again, there's an easy way to figure out census tract qualifications, and I will send that information in a follow-up to this webinar, along with other information, including the slides. So just a little bit about the state and national registers of historic places. They designate historic and cultural and architectural significance. And the 3 levels of historic designation are national, state, and then the local. So in New York State, if you are on the National Register, you are automatically on the state register. And it's been determined that you have a significant historic building. And when looking at this and thinking about the historic tax programs, you're going to want to certify that the Secretary's standards of rehab are being used. So these are a set of 10 standards, which basically boil down to keeping what you have and repair it, and if not, you replace it in kind. So if I go back to this slide, when you look at your projects, you must be approved by the State Historic Preservation Office prior to starting your project. This is number 1. Have to go everything through the SHPO and make sure everything is approved before you start your work if you want to be sure to get your credit. And then secondly, as I just mentioned, it must meet the Secretary's standards. So it's a great idea to look through those 10 standards to make sure that's in line with what you're envisioning in terms of your project, and being sure that you can meet those standards in order to claim your tax credit. And then lastly, you must meet all your local ordinances and zoning regulations. So just to go over a few qualifying expenses, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to give a general idea of what kinds of things are included. These are some very popular ones we get questions about. Can I claim material costs? Yes. Professional labor costs are a yes. One thing I'll note here is if the homeowner is deciding to do their own labor, as in sweat equity, only the material costs can be claimed for the work. You might be a great contractor, but unfortunately that is not going to be something that you could claim as a tax credit. Another question we get a lot is about solar panels. This credit will cover solar panels if it is not visible from a public right-of-way. And that goes back to the Secretary of Standards, where you're trying to treat the building with as much care and consideration as you can. So while we are certainly proponents of renewable energy, it needs to be done in a way that's sensitive to the historic building. And then one other point I'll mention is reconstruction of a missing or historic feature. This example is a porch, and there was photographic documentation of it. So it's clear that from that definition, you can use it to recreate something so long as you have a good idea that it was existing and how it was existing previously. Now, a couple non-qualifying expenses. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just to give you an idea of the types of things that don't qualify. As I've already mentioned, the labor done by a homeowner does not qualify. You can also not qualify under acquisition costs, financing fees, leasing, appliances, demolition of a secondary building on the site would not qualify, nor would enlargement or new construction of the primary building. One question we get a lot is about fencing, particularly historic fencing, and that is going to be something that unfortunately does not qualify. It needs to be within the scope of the actual primary building. So how does this process work? So again, this is going to go through the SHPO office, the State Historic Preservation Office, and they break it down to a simple Part 3 application process, 1, 2, and 3. So 1 and 2 get submitted together prior to your work commencing. And it really gives them a sense of what the project is, whether you qualify, and kind of what you're trying to achieve by order of your process. One thing I'll note here is that images are critical. They really need to have a good understanding of what your project is, and the better images, the easier it's going to make their job, and frankly, the easier it's going to make your process in determining whether you qualify for the work that you're proposing. So the part 2 will define the scope of the work. What are you proposing to do? And I'll go over that in a little bit more detail with a sample project sheet. And then part 3 is going to be where you report back to SHPO and you actually claim your credit. So if you look, you'll see the fee schedule, and it's a nominal part 2 fee of $25. And then for the part 3, your final fee is going to be based on your final rehab expenses. So you can see that depending on how much you spend for your project, those are going to go up in cost for your fee. One thing I'll note here that is also a question a lot is, in New York for this program, if your New York adjusted gross income is $60,000 or below, then you are exempt from processing fees. And if the amount of the credit exceeds your tax for the year, your tax credit can convert to a refund, and they will actually send you a refund check. So that's really helpful to know going in if you fall in that bracket. So here's a sample homeowner project sheet. As you can see, you would provide something similar to this, being able to identify what work you would like to do and having the existing condition noted. This is also going to accompany your images. So again, those really important images are going to fit into this and be able to give the SHPO an idea of what your project you're looking to do, and then also an estimated cost. So it's worth noting that at this point, you do not need a final confirmed cost. This is only an estimate that you need to provide, and the final cost will be provided in your part 3. So that being said, how can the league assist you with tax credits? We can help you determine if a potential historic district or home falls within the eligible census tract. We'd be happy to share a list of consultants that have historic tax credit experience in your area. And we generally answer questions about tax credits and try to connect people to the appropriate SHPO staff that they're interested in pursuing a tax credit application. So here's all the ways you can reach us. Please do log onto our website and sign up for email alerts so you can hear about all the information we have going on. There's my email if you have a follow-up question or were confused about something in the presentation. Again, please be using that Q&A. I saw some coming through, so that's great. And then at this point, I wanted to turn it over to Nick Zumbulyadis. He's got a great story to share. And Nick has restored his home in the Maplewood Historic District in Rochester, like I had mentioned at the beginning, using the Historic Tax Credit Program for homeowners. Nick is a research chemist, and he retired in 2005 from the Eastman Kodak Research Laboratories. So I think this will be a really great opportunity to showcase what real people are doing out there in New York State, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. Again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, and at the end of his presentation, we'll go back and answer them along with any questions you might have for him. So I'll turn it over to Nick.
Thank you, Christina. Can you please start the video? Okay, the video.
Yep, let me turn it off real quick here. Okay, can you share your screen, Nick?
Well, I'm sure I can share my screen. No, host disabled attendee screen sharing. Let me see here. No, I cannot. You have disabled it.
Hold on, let me try to fix that. Hold on, everyone. Technical difficulties. I'm sure everyone understands.
No. Okay, I think so. I think I can start the video now. Okay, let me start the screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yep. We can see you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah.
I can't see your PowerPoint yet.
You
gotta
cannot
share
see my
it.
PowerPoint?
No, you got to share it.
Oh, I share it. Okay. Thank you. How about that now?
Perfect.
You can see it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. You can see my PowerPoint, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Well, Christina, thank you for the introduction and for inviting me to participate at this webinar. What better way to start to celebrate the month of May, which is the official preservation month, at least here in New York State. As I always maintained that unlike routine maintenance, restoring an old home is really a labor of love. I convince you today that the tax credit program really does enhance that special relationship. Oops, well, I couldn't go to my next slide for some reason. Yeah, this is our home at 2 Seneca Parkway in Rochester, New York. The house was built in 1910 for William and Elizabeth Robinson. We purchased it in 1994. It had several owners, and we bought it from a family who were the occupants at the time. It is a Tudor revival house with a neoclassical interiors, and it has a 2-story detached garage at the back. You can see it on this picture, but we'll get back to that later. The house is located, as Christina said, in the Maplewood neighborhood of Rochester, in the Maplewood Historic District. The district was created in 1997 and was expanded recently in 2016. Visually, it combines the natural beauty of the lower falls of the Genesee and the gorge, together with the landscaped environment by Frederick Law Olmsted. There are two Olmsted designed parkways in Maplewood, Lakeview Park Mall and our street, Seneca Parkway. The houses in the district date back mostly to the late 19th, early 20th centuries and represent an ensemble of many diverse architectural styles. Lakeview Park is somewhat earlier, late 19th century with Queen vernaculars and so forth. And Seneca Parkway is a very eclectic mix of styles. We became aware of the tax credit program through a workshop that was organized in 2010 by the Landmark Society of Western New York. And in fact, we learned a lot at that workshop, so much so that within 2 years, in 2012, we could obtain our first so-called certificate of completion. That's what you get at the end of the process, and you can claim your tax credit. So we completed 2 such sets of projects, and we are currently on our 3rd set of projects. Now we have certain criteria. My wife and I have certain criteria in selecting projects. First and foremost, one has to address issues involving the stability of the structure and safety issues. Second, a faithful restoration of any deteriorating architectural details, both exterior and interior. Old photos, as Christina said, can be very helpful, and I will give you a couple of examples of that. And finally, reversal of inappropriate remodeling and repairs, sort of commonly called remodeling. These are the 3 criteria we use. And in the following, I have chosen examples of interior, exterior, and garage-related projects that we have completed. Now, let me point out that the garage-related projects are no longer allowed, but I included them because it will help make some important points for the process. All throughout the years, and whether we are pursuing a project or not, we try to build up and maintain a list of qualified craftsmen and professionals. Reputable professionals, like general contractors, roofers, electricians, plumbers, of course, but they're also specialists with proven track record in preservation and restoration. And there you need painters, woodworkers, masons, experts in plaster and stucco repair, and window experts. And I think preserving these skilled trades locally, I think is crucial across the state of New York. The Landmark Society of Western New York had listed the skilled trades generically as one of their list of 5 to revive in 2016. So let's start with our first project. It's an interior project. It refers to it concerns our formal living room, which has 2 features. One is mahogany wainscoting and crown molding throughout the first floor, and except one location. When we first moved into the house, as you entered the living room, on your left, you had this crude shelf made of plywood and mounted over a section of parquetry that appeared damaged. That had to go. And in fact, it was removed. The shelf was removed. The plaster was repaired. And our professional woodworker recreated the parquetry floor from this point here. You can see it vaguely all the way down to the corner. Also, we recreated the wainscoting out of mahogany, matching the original molding in exactly 100% detail. I was surprised how close you could get to the detail. And we also had to stain it a little bit to match the existing mahogany, which had darkened through the decades. The wall was, as I pointed out earlier, was repaired. The plaster was repaired. However, there was no possibility of finding matching the wallpaper, and there was some domestic resistance at replacing the entire room, wallpapering the entire room. But we found a solution to that, which I'll show you at the end of the presentation. The second project I would like to describe is the garage. When we got the house, first of all, the 2 entrances to the garage had been shrunk to accommodate commercial rolling doors that go up and down, and the cheapest and most crudest construction was used to do so, and plus there was a trellis which we believe was there, maybe not quite as old as the house, but close, which was dilapidated and eventually one day blew away in a windstorm. We know the trellis was there, by the way, at least since 1974, because we can see its outline in the snow here in an old picture that is somehow part of a city document. Quite fortuitously, I found this picture. And so we tore the doors out and this fake jambs, and brought it back all the way to the original door jamb, which was made of cypress, and you could see the mortises for the original hinges, plus we found 1 broken hinge under that wood, under that construction, that primitive construction. And from that, we fabricated 12 new hinges matching the old ones. Our woodworker also recreated 2 doors exactly to fit the opening in a manner that would have been very similar to what was there, the door level. And here, we also redid the trellis, and you can see now it frames the side door to the garage. Of course, you might say that these doors are large and heavy. Are they practical in this day and age? Well, watch. Hope it works. Excuse the clutter, but you can see that the doors can be remotely operated, both of them. I would like now to turn it to a couple of exterior projects, and they all involve masonry in our case. The first one involves one of the two chimneys on our house. The state before was what I call a state of imminent collapse, with a very seriously deteriorated mortar, and the whole chimney was tilting actually a little bit. So our masons deconstructed the chimney all the way to the eaves. The original bricks were reused after the old mortar was ground away. Additional bricks were necessary with the same aspect ratio and kind of appearance. We were able, curiously enough, to order them from a kiln in Nebraska, and they were put on a flatbed truck and shipped to Rochester. At the end, we had the chimney reconstructed, pretty much. Our second exterior project, and the last one I'm going to describe, involved outdoors again. I mean, it involved masonry again, and it involves the front porch. And here I've given you a little reel filled out, an example of a project worksheet as it was submitted to the state. This is not a sample, as Christina showed, but the real thing. And in fact, we pointed out, and I think it was in your sample, that was saying the same thing. It doesn't have to be enormous, but there are certain critical things that you should mention to make the whole process move along more easily. And we pointed out that indeed we were going to, when we repoint the bricks in the porch area, there will be matching mortar in every respect in terms of texture and strength and color, and that indeed is what our mason was able to do. But there was one little problem, an additional problem. After we repointed all the bricks, and all the bricks along the walls here, which had shifted a little bit because of deteriorating mortar, they were placed back and arranged properly. The mason pointed out to me that the cheek walls to the stairs had actually been repaired at some point, and the repair was so bad that there was water seepage that it made the walls rather wobbly and well, they weren't in good shape. Plus, for example, goes all around the house, the base of the house. In both cases, both the left one as you face and the right one had shifted. Here, somebody did a totally inappropriate repair, and they stuffed it with cement, with concrete. So what was done was to deconstruct again the cheek walls, go through the same process of removing the mortar, and then reconstructing. Reconstructing the cheek walls and setting the Medina sandstone properly. Plus, you can see here there was a lot of cracks that where water had seeped in, and that was the main cause for the deterioration. That was addressed in the reconstruction. Plus, the layout of the bricks was brought back to its original condition, and you'll see what I mean in a second. This is the front porch as it looks today. And here, focus on this area here. Focus on this area here and the way the bricks are. And then compare this to an older picture from 1917 and look at the bricks again. It's the exact same layout. Well, this is a small additional bonus that you get when, in fact, when you do the reconstruction, which had to be done. And our mason was, in fact, that's to his credit, our mason was very careful, and he himself took it upon himself to actually reproduce the original pattern of the bricks the way it was on this photograph. So it's always good to have skilled tradesmen who also respect history. These are all the projects I wanted to talk to you briefly about. I will leave you with a thought, with a view of our living room, and my thought that, first of all, 20% tax credit makes a difference between just doing it, because lots of things you have to do, and doing it right. And also the wallpaper problem. With that, thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to turn this now to Christina again.
Nick, thank you so much for sharing your amazing project and your amazing house with us. Let me see if I can go ahead and get control back here.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again. I think that was really great to be able to see how these historic tax credits are really working for homeowners in New York State. And, you know, Nick's experience is by no means unusual. We see this happen every day, and it's really great. Nick, if you could stop sharing your screen, I can take it back.
Okay. Your internet connections on. Okay, how do I do that? I picked on. I tried not to, but.
Okay, hold on. Okay, we're good.
Oh, okay. So oh, here it is now. I can stop video.
Nick, you can go ahead. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Is that what you want me to do? No.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, then okay.
So yeah, so I'm going to start answering some questions. Please, if anyone has any additional questions or they have questions for Nick, who just finished up on his project, please let us know. So let me jump right in. So one question we got, this question was from Anthony. He said, what is the best way for our Preservation Commission to get the rehab tax credit program out to the public? I think this is a great question. Programs are only as good as the people promoting them. So if we're not talking about them and we're not sharing our experiences, and this is something that's really, really important to do at the local level. You know your residents and your communities best. So any information you can share that's going to help them is going to be amazing. Obviously, we try to help as much as we can as the nonprofit for preservation. We typically go around to different communities. Before this quarantine, we used to give presentations in different communities and share our experiences and try to impart what might be helpful to different communities. The State Historic Preservation Office obviously is amazing at this. They go around as well to different communities and promote their programs on their own. A lot of times we will partner with the SHPO and visit these communities together where we can. So hopefully there will be a day soon when we can get back out there and do that again. Of course, for now, we're happy to have this technology and get some of the info across this way. So in terms of getting your local commission to know about it, hosting your own webinar, or when we can travel again, doing your own local community meetings is a great way to get that across. And please don't hesitate to reach out to the league if we can be helpful coordinating that in some way, and we'll certainly see what we can do. So next question, I had a question on, hold on one second. There's a concern that the homeowner historic tax credit leads to displacement since the investment must occur in qualified census tracts. If there are those concerns, have those impacts actually been studied and verified, or is it more of a perception problem? So I would not necessarily say so. This is a great question, so thank you, Aaron Berg, for asking it. This program has encouraged investment by longtime homeowners, and we really feel like this is a program that appeals to numerous communities across the state. And what it really does is allows homeowners who've lived in their house for years to be able to incentivize those homeowners to stay in their homes and perhaps do deferred maintenance repairs that really need to get done. So we see it as a great way to be able to get those things done. So I guess to answer your question, it might be more of a perception issue. And so, you know, we're constantly looking on ways that we can kind of get that information out there and improve that. And great question.
Yeah, may I jump in on that?
Yes, please,
yeah.
Nick.
You know that in our experience, census tracts are really not laid down strictly along economic lines either. So they are very spotty. And so you can have a tremendous diversity of income within something which is ostensibly the same census tract. And so don't look at your personal situation or the situation of your neighbors on your street or because the economics of the census tract could be quite different. So that you know, you may qualify even though you think you don't qualify because you feel you are maybe a higher wage earner. So census tracts can be very misleading in terms of the actual socioeconomic situation of a neighborhood or a district. They in our case, they go across the Genesee River. I mean, how can this be? How can this be reflective of reality? So anyway.
That's a great point. Thank you, Nick, so much for pointing that out. Okay, next question. Who determines whether a building is contributing or non-contributing to a National Historic District? SHPO or the local architectural commission? Great question. So if we're talking about the National Register, which can include an individually listed building or a contributing building that's part of a National Register Historic District. So if you're talking about a National Historic District, it's going to have a nomination form that has all the information compiled that identifies all the buildings in that district. Within that nomination form, it identifies what a contributing building is and what a non-contributing building is. So this is really important. So within a historic district, you might have, say, 100 buildings, for example, and 80 of those might be contributing to the historic theme of that district. So those would all be considered contributing, while, say, the extra 20 might be some infill that's been sprinkled in. Maybe there's some 1980s that were in there. So even though they're within the physical boundaries of the district, they're not listed as a contributing building. So that is going to be determined by the National Register. So that's determined on the federal level. So I hope that helps. Great question from Amy about when will the 2020 census results affect census tracts, and I do not know the answer to that. So that is a great question for me to follow up with SHPO with, and if they're on the call, please feel free to chime in somewhere in the chat or elsewhere, because that is a great question to know. What happens if you have to have an emergency repair or a remodel, cannot wait for the approval process to take place? Can you apply for past emergency work such as roofing or windows? Another great question. This is going to be a very SHPO specific question. So if somebody has this situation, I would suggest reaching out to the State Historic Preservation Office or the SHPO and determining, you know, what they can do. If anything, I would say by general rule, it's not going to be allowed. But again, I would definitely contact the SHPO to see what they're allowed to do within their program parameters. Here's another question from David. Can a current roof be replaced by a metal roof? I'm assuming you mean an asphalt roof currently. I'm not sure. Certainly if you have a metal roof and you're going to a metal roof, that's a pretty easy, thank you, David. So yes, he is looking for asphalt to metal. So again, this is gonna be something you'll wanna coordinate with the SHPO with, and just to determine that it doesn't negatively affect the historic designation on that property. I think in keeping with the Secretary's standards, keeping with what would be appropriate for that building. So obviously we all know that asphalt shingles are probably not, you know, an original feature of a building. I'm assuming it's historic, so it's at least, you know, over 50 years old. So probably didn't have asphalt shingles originally. So that would be something that I would check with SHPO with and try to determine if they have a solution for that. So I think that's the majority of the questions. If I haven't answered your question, please feel free to reach out to me, and hopefully we can get those answered. And again, I can put you in touch with the SHPO office, and especially if you're at the stage where you're looking to get a project together, I think that is going to be really helpful to put you in contact with them. So going back to the census question real quick, I'm recalling that there is a 2-year transition window if the census tract falls out, so I will leave you with that information. So I wouldn't be too concerned that you're immediately going to fall out of census tract eligibility. But that being said, it's not necessarily something you want to delay on either, because the program, you know, the census tracts do fall in and out of eligibility once in a while. So again, if I missed your question or didn't quite answer it fully, please reach out to me. We'd be happy to answer them and put you in touch with SHPO. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today. I think this was really great. We had a really great turnout, and hopefully we can do more of these. Please join us on the 1st and the 29th of June if you want to know more about commercial tax credits or using the homeowner credit with the commercial tax credits. And again, please check out our website and sign up for our email updates from the Preservation League of New York State. Keep involved with what we have going on. And if you want to support historic and cultural resources in our work, please feel free to make a donation and support our work. So I will thank everyone, and after this you'll receive all of our slides and some additional information for SHPO, including eligibility information and some more useful information. Thanks so much. Bye now.